Buckle up, listeners, because today we're diving headfirst into the wild world of student loans and the upcoming election.
Ooh, yeah, this is a big one.
It is. And get this, almost a quarter of student loan borrowers say that loan forgiveness is make or break for their vote.
Seriously, that many?
Yeah, it's a huge voting block. So we're cracking open this NerdWallet article that breaks down where exactly Harris and Trump stand on the issue.
Yeah, this is important stuff, for sure.
Definitely. Whether you're swimming in student debt right now, planning for your future education, or just trying to wrap your head around this whole debate.
It's one of those issues that touches so many people directly or indirectly.
Absolutely. So think of this deep dive as your cheat sheet to figuring out how this election could actually impact your student loans.
I like it.
All right. First up, the big kahuna, broad student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, everybody's talking about this one.
Right. And not surprisingly, Harris and Biden are expected to fight tooth and nail to defend the Biden forgiveness programs we have now, legal challenges and all.
Yeah, they've really staked their claim on providing this relief, but it goes to show it's not a done deal. The courts could have just as much say as the election itself.
So even if your candidate wins, it might not be a slam dunk for student loan forgiveness.
Exactly. There are other players in the game, so to speak.
A lot of factors at play. Now, on the flip side, there's Trump, who's been pretty vocal about opposing widespread loan forgiveness.
He's definitely been consistent on that.
Yeah, aligning himself with Republicans who are pushing to dismantle the current programs.
It's one of those issues where the two sides have fundamentally different approaches.
Totally. And this is where things could get really interesting if Trump is elected. We're potentially talking about a complete 180 on student loan policy. And that could have major ripple effects, like imagine tuition costs going through the roof because fewer people can access higher education.
It's all connected.
Exactly. It's not just about erasing debt. It's about the long-term impact on education and affordability. So with Trump, we could be looking at a very different landscape for student loans.
Definitely a possibility, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something that hits a little closer to home for a lot of borrowers, those monthly payments.
Ah, yes. Income-driven repayment plans, or IDRs, as they're often called.
Right, IDR. So these are supposed to make things a little easier, right?
Exactly. They adjust your monthly payments based on your income and family size, so it's not like one size fits all.
Makes sense. And Harris and Biden are all in on SEE, the newest IDR plan, which seems to be pretty generous to borrowers.
It is, potentially offering some of the lowest payment options we've seen. But, of course, nothing is ever simple when it comes to student loans.
Right, because there are those lawsuits against SEE, aren't there?
Unfortunately, yes. There are legal challenges, which just goes to show that even with good intentions, getting these policies up and running can be a long and bumpy road.
So even if SEE is ultimately upheld, there's going to be a period of uncertainty.
Exactly. Uncertainty and probably a lot of frustration for borrowers who are waiting for relief.
Absolutely. So where does Trump stand on all this?
Well, he's opposed to SAVE, and his alternative, which is laid out in something called Project 2025, is interesting, to say the least. It's basically a proposal to scrap all the existing IDR plans and replace them with a single simplified option.
Okay, and what's the catch? There's always a catch, right?
Right. The catch is that this new plan is, how shall I put it, considerably less generous to borrowers. We could be talking about significantly higher monthly payments for many people.
Ouch, that's going to hurt. And the article actually gives this crazy example. A family making, say, $50,000 a year, they could be looking at $0 a month under SAVE, but under this Republican plan, boom, $156 every month.
Yeah, that's the difference on the ground right there. That's an extra grocery bill, an unexpected car repair, or money that could be going into savings. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. It really drives home how much these policies can impact people's everyday lives. All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about those who dedicate their careers to public service teachers, nurses, firefighters, the list goes on. What about public service loan forgiveness, PSLF?
Right, PSLF. It's designed to forgive the remaining student debt for people in those crucial public service jobs after they've made 10 years of qualifying payments.
Right, 10 years of service, you get that debt relief.
Exactly. And Harris and Biden have been big proponents of PSLF. They want to make it easier to navigate, less bureaucratic, because the application process has been notoriously complicated in the past. Plus, they've talked about expanding eligibility to cover even more people, like early childhood educators who weren't included originally.
So clearly a priority for them. What about Trump? What's his stance on PSLF?
Well, his track record tells a different story. During his presidency, there was a real crackdown on PSLF with, and this is kind of shocking, 99% of applications being rejected at one point.
99%.
You're kidding.
Nope, 99%.
Yeah.
So yeah, a pretty stark contrast in approaches there.
Wow. Okay, we've talked about traditional four-year degrees, but what about other paths, like trade schools or community colleges? Not everyone wants a four-year degree, and those costs can be outrageous.
Absolutely, and it's something both sides seem to agree on. We need more diverse and affordable options beyond that traditional four-year track. The question is, how do we get there?
Right, it's about the how. So how are Harris and Biden approaching it? Well, they're leaning towards making community college tuition-free and pumping more money into Pell Grants, which are a lifeline for low-income students trying to afford college. It's about removing those financial barriers and opening doors for more students, regardless of their background.
So basically, reducing the cost of education across the board. How does Trump see it?
He's on board with expanding options, for sure, but his focus is less on direct financial aid, like tuition-free community college or bigger Pell Grants. He's more about encouraging private sector involvement or exploring different funding models, perhaps.
So it's not just about the types of education, but also about who's paying for it.
Exactly. It's a fundamental difference in how you view the role of government in education.
Really interesting. Now, for our final act, let's talk about something called borrower defense, which, from what I understand, is super important for students who might have been misled by their schools, right?
You got it. Borrower defense is a legal provision that can help people get their loans forgiven if they can prove their school used shady tactics.
Shady tactics, like what?
Oh, things like inflating job placement rates, misrepresenting program costs, basically tricking students into taking on debt they might not be able to repay.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
So how do our candidates stack up on this issue? I know Harris has a history of taking on those predatory for-profit colleges.
Oh, absolutely. Back when she was Attorney General of California, she went toe-to-toe with Corinthian Colleges, this for-profit chain that was accused of totally misleading students.
And didn't that result in a ton of student loan discharges?
It did. Millions of dollars worth. Corinthian was forced to pay $1.1 billion in relief to students. It was a landmark case, and it really solidified Harris's reputation as a champion for students' rights. And then, of course, the Biden administration used that same borrower defense program to forgive billions more in loans for former Corinthian students.
So it's safe to say they're probably going to continue pushing for stronger borrower defenses.
It's a good bet. They've made it clear they're not afraid to hold colleges accountable. Now, Trump's approach has been, shall we say, a bit different.
How so?
Well, he's more about rolling back regulations, and that includes borrower defense rules. His administration actually tried to block a rule that would make it easier for defrauded students to get relief, although the courts ultimately overturned it.
So once again, we're seeing a pretty stark difference in philosophy.
Definitely. It boils down to where you stand on the whole government regulation versus personal responsibility debate.
And for students who are taken advantage of, it can make all the difference.
No doubt. It's their financial future hanging in the balance.
This is a lot to process. We've covered so much ground, and it's clear this election has huge implications for anyone dealing with student loans or planning for their future education.
It really does. And while we've been talking about the presidential race, there's another crucial piece of the puzzle we can't ignore: Congress.
It's true. We often get so caught up in the presidential race that we forget about all the other elections happening at the same time.
Right. But those down-ballot races, they matter too, especially when we're talking about something as complex as student loan policy.
Because at the end of the day, it's Congress that actually makes the laws.
Right. Exactly. The president can propose and advocate for policies, but it's Congress that holds the purse strings.
Yeah.
They decide how these programs are funded, how they're implemented, the whole shebang.
So even if a president wants to make big changes on student loans, they're going to hit a wall if Congress isn't on board.
100%. It's a team effort, or at least it's supposed to be.
And that's why it's so important to pay attention to those congressional elections. Your vote for your representative could actually have a more direct impact on student loan policy than your vote for president.
It's one of those things they don't always teach you in school, right? How much power Congress really has.
For real. So listeners, if you're passionate about student loans, get out there and research those candidates in your local elections. Find out where they stand, what they're proposing, and make your voice heard.
Absolutely. Your vote is your voice in this whole system. Don't waste it.
Well said. This has been a whirlwind deep dive into the wild world of student loans and the upcoming election. We've covered a ton of ground today.
We really have everything from broad loan forgiveness to the ins and outs of income-driven repayment plans and even those predatory for-profit colleges.
And while we've focused on where the candidates stand, it really all boils down to a bigger question. How much say should voters have when it comes to specific student loan policies?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Should it be up to the government to decide how these programs work, or should borrowers themselves have more of a say?
It's a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's about your education, your future, your financial well-being.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with that food for thought. If you want to dig even deeper into the nitty-gritty, be sure to check out the full NerdWallet article. We'll link it in the show notes. And as always, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. But when it comes to crushing your federal student loan debt, eduloanrelief.com means business.